So in order for we got to turn it off.
Hello, is my mic working?
Gary, you're out there somewhere?
Bring it off. The camera should do that.
And I am calling this meeting to order. There are 4 of us present, and technically that is a quorum. But if there are others out there, would you please speak up?
This is Susan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
This is Anne. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome.
Would all the people who are not here please hold up your hands?
Wait, was Carrie on?
I didn't hear Carrie. Okay, so let's begin. A fairly simple and straightforward agenda tonight. So we are going to walk through all of the items that we believe to be uncertain and see if we can correct those tonight. Does anyone have, and I think everyone has access to this in front of them. Does everyone have the list of 8 items that we want to discuss?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have an additional 1 or 2 that they would like to add? Okay, so we will, should we go through this quickly and just touch base? Okay. So the first item I'd put on number 3, statement of the work session objectives. So we want to identify those elements that in the original parking restriction guidelines were missing or subject to uncertainty or interpretation. Then once we know what they are, we want to discuss each one of those uncertainties with the goal of achieving some consensus. And then finally, if we can achieve consensus or vote on these, then the last thing we want to do, and this may be done outside of the meeting, but we want to modify the language in the current parking restriction guidelines so that we clearly explain these uncertain areas. Okay. Number 4, we want to update. Oh, I'm sorry. There was a concern that we had not yet heard any feedback about the tests that we did around the Christmas holiday. And recently I learned that that was extended. So that being the case, there really is no conclusion at this point. And I'm thinking we should just move on. Yeah, Steve?
I think it'd be worth just touch base. I mean, I live there. I don't know if you guys have walked by there.
Okay. Could I ask you to?
giving my observations living on that block. So when it went into force, it was interesting to me that there was an officer parked there on school mornings, I think for most of the week. And he clearly told students they couldn't park where they couldn't park when they tried to. It was odd to me that he didn't seem to be trying to direct them to other options. So that was kind of, I think that's when we heard those rumors of kids coming to school crying and those kinds of things, but then we really have not seen police there otherwise. There are some student non-residents who park in the residence sections, and I haven't called in on any of those, but it does happen. And then the other part of it is, and then the other side of the street is no parking anytime. And it's interesting, folks who just don't care about street signs and do what they want, off hours. So that happens sporadically. But as a part of the discussion here, but my observation is it hasn't changed when students aren't in school. There rarely are any cars parked, on that block. So go ahead.
Is there a mechanism for residents to get a resident identifier?
Yeah, they could come to City Hall and get their stickers.
Okay.
Right.
And they,
Right.
have they done that?
I've heard that it's not been very many. Yeah, I know one neighbor who has a nanny. I'm certain she has, but I don't know about the others.
But in light of the fact that this is just a temporary thing, I'm not sure if I were a neighbor, I would run to City Hall.
Yeah.
to
But
get
in
a
order to
sticker.
see if it's really working,
Well,
and how do we know if non-residents are parking in the reserved spots?
Right.
Just because you probably know because they're
Yeah.
your neighbors.
Yeah, or when they get out of the car and they're 16 years old and look like a high school student, they walk to the high school.
Yeah.
Well, it could have solved the problem without people getting the stickers. That's possible. If you felt it was solved, then yes, it would be better yet if they had their tags, but you could know if it made an impact.
My takeaway from this, and I'm pleased, I'm not trying to be critical of anybody that set this up, but my criticism of this, it would be that we really didn't define this very well on the front end about what was our goal and what were we going to observe and what were we not going to observe.
Right. And then, and for the police, do we know if any tickets have been written on the side that's no parking
We're talking about,
on Swan
okay,
in the test area?
so there was some leeway we gave, obviously, but by and large, they're kind of respecting the signs from my perspective. I don't track parking tickets that
Right.
closely, to be honest with you.
I think we're
There
just
are
saying
always tickets, parking tickets written in that area. We have an officer that that's one of their major assignments, the business liaison officer. But when I drive through there, I regularly don't see a lot of
Right.
illegally parked vehicles there.
And I think the biggest thing I've heard negative is that it pushed the problem to Sylvester, maybe,
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's-
Which is kind of the problem we're trying to solve in the first place.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but given the scope of the experiment, it doesn't matter that it pushed it to Sylvester because you would implement it there also and you'd spread it out.
Right.
So I don't think that affects the validity of the test.
Right.
Right. So in light of that, do we want to just table that for right now and, okay? For purposes of the objective tonight? Okay. All right. Well, if there are no objection, I'm sorry.
Well, what's the official and what is an official result of the experiment? We've heard your story and it's believable.
Yeah.
But that's not what
Right.
you wanted more than your story. You wanted an official.
Well, let me ask it this way. What would we consider failure and what would we consider success? Do we even know?
Well, I think if one of the goals being accessibility on the street, safety, it's certainly, those things are successful. I mean, we don't have trash trucks not being able to get to people's trash. We had a street sweeper for the first time in years, come down my side of the block. Then it's just wide enough, for always passage. So that's a big
Mhm.
success feature.
Okay.
this may be a naive question, but you got street sweeping on one side.
Yeah,
Would you ever get street sweeping on the other side?
only if they come out of school hours, and that didn't used to happen. Yeah.
Okay. Any,
And we don't have street park.
We did on the most windiest day of all.
you talk. Yes.
So green is on, red is off.
Thank you.
Just like
It's
like
so people can
traffic.
hear on the Zoom.
Okay.
It's good for a traffic engineer to tell
Yeah,
what's green.
Green and red. I
Hey,
can follow that.
And Susan, are you having any difficulties hearing what's being said in the meeting? And can you hear
Oh,
me?
no, I'm fine. I was muted. Sorry.
All right, so you guys are hearing everything okay?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. If it's okay with everyone, what I'd like to do is start in on the process of going through each of these. If there's no objection. So the review steps I wrote in here, one of us volunteers to describe the problem, the misunderstanding, or clarification. Then we discuss that. Third, we identify any unintended consequences that might happen, which we seem to have found a few. And then finally, we'll vote to determine what the sense of the group is. So the first one are the parking restrictions that we're proposing. Are they going to be effective 24 hours a day or only during the parts of the day when they would normally be affected? So for example, if school starts at 8 and it's over by 4 o'clock, it would only be effective during that 8 to 4 time frame.
So one thing I think we need to clarify.
Yeah, please.
There's really two different sets of restrictions. So when we just say the restrictions,
Yes.
we have a width restriction and we have a shared restriction
Right,
potentially.
right.
Those don't necessarily
Go hand in hand.
go hand in hand. So I think we have to maybe vote on both of those.
Right,
And that has to be sort of defined a little bit that, I mean, we can't just say the restrictions. Because
right.
there might be a situation where that we have parking on one side of the street, but no one cares about shared.
Is it fair, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but is it fair to assume that the restrictions having to do with width, the width of the street, those are not going to change with day or night or time or, right? Because that's about safety, that's about the trucks getting through, and that needs to be in place all the time.
But I think that's something we have to vote on.
Well, that's
because
what I'm saying, do we want to vote on that separately?
Yes.
Anybody else?
Anything that we decide we're gonna vote on, I want to be sure it's clearly understood, because I'm not quite sure what you two are including in that statement, so.
Okay, so do you want me to?
Yeah,
Or
but
do you want to
talk
try to?
Yeah, so I would just ask for more clarity on each piece as we vote on it. So if we're talking about the width restrictions, are we talking about just that we've identified narrow, medium, and large? Are we talking about applying restrictions to open parking 24/7, depending on that width? You know, so I guess I want to be sure, are we just
Okay.
talking about that we've set up these categories? Or are we talking about when they're open to parking or not?
Right, so from my I'll speak for myself and then you can tell me to quiet down. If a street is wide enough to accommodate parking on both sides, that decision would be made once and for all, 24/7. It's never any different from that. So, and if it's been determined that the street is only wide enough for parking on one side, again, that would be all the time. And if it's not wide enough for any parking, then parking would never be allowed there. Because that specific thing has to do with safety. And I don't think we want to explain to our citizens that we want to be safe during these hours, but we don't care if you're safe on these hours. I think that's just kind of crazy. That's just my opinion.
And that feeds into the discussion of, is this by request? Or is it,
Well, that's another question.
Right.
But I see what you're saying, yes. But I mean, just that part of it, is it okay if that part of it is always on or off?
I mean, that's subject to vote. I know I'll vote against it.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm not gonna change
Okay.
people's mind. You know.
So does anybody, go ahead, Carrie, do you have some? Then do we want to go ahead and vote on that piece?
do we have more discussion about that piece?
Well, what came to my mind was when we talked about Valley and we had some residents, and that was a very narrow street. I think Carrie, you mentioned it may be at one part of it was narrow as 13 feet or something like that. And so we had some residents who were looking at some restrictions. They withdrew the request, as I recall, and so we let it lapse. So if we're so concerned with safety, then then it doesn't make any sense to me to wait for somebody to request it. That street should be no parking on either side. Are you ready for that? Or is that going to be the second discussion about somebody there has to request it?
I think
Which
that,
makes no sense to me if we're so concerned just driven by safety. I mean, it makes no sense to me to wait for a resident request. So if we push this through,
I think I understand your argument. I do. I don't quite agree with that, but I understand what you're saying. So I think that needs to be a separate vote.
Anne's hand is up. So,
Oh, Anne, please speak up.
no, there we go.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Awesome. I just, I had to sign out and sign back in, and so I lost my speaking privileges, hence my hand being up. Thanks, y'all.
Okay,
Okay,
did you have something to add?
No, just that I'm here and I'll be helpful as much as I can.
Okay,
okay. Any other discussion?
Well, and I guess that is the other vote, but along the safety thing, I totally understand that should apply to all. Or is it only being requested in areas that are really highly congested? Like safety isn't as potentially a problem because there's just no traffic there usually.
well, except one of the driving factors was being able to get an emergency vehicle down the street. And so congested meaning, you know, are we going to go back to talking about one car on the street blocks it for the street?
Right. No, I get that.
I think this is part of the later discussion, but I think part of it is just making it implementable for the city. There's just absolutely no way they can overnight decide every street in Webster now has a parking restriction of some kind.
Right.
So I think the idea was
Guidelines.
some sort of by request just makes it allowed to where people see that there's an urgent need, they can start implementing on a street by street basis. And if that's not the case, maybe we have a recommendation where they implement in blocks of a certain size over a certain amount of time or something like that.
Is it fair to say that that would really ultimately be the,
Decision of the city.
yeah.
Yeah, I think so. but-
Public Works would have
Yes.
to decide what
But
priority
I
to
think if
put on it.
we make this our policy and our guidance is that we think it should
Yeah.
happen unilaterally overnight, we'll never get this policy passed.
I agree, and I think if it's spelled out clear, a little clearer than we have now, how people can request it, you know, because that's not really spelled out here, and maybe it doesn't need to, maybe there's already a ordinance that says how people can do
I
that.
think originally that's why we just thought we'd use the same process. People come to us when they know their street is overparked.
And these are the guidelines,
Yeah.
just like
Right.
stop sign. I mean, we don't have a stop sign everywhere the guidelines say there should be, correct? So it's the same kind of
Right.
thought.
Okay, we're kind of drifting here. So I need to kind of call us back here. So the question on the table is, will the parking restrictions, I'm sorry, on the parking on both sides, parking on one side or parking on no sides, is that something that we're going to, once it's approved, that we're going to implement full time, all the time, 24/7. Or not. So all in favor?
I'm sorry, but I don't think the discussion is enough because Steve sent us an email today and I don't think your points have come clearly across that you don't like that.
Well, I think it came across to me.
Yeah, my issue is I was able to be clearer in the email than speaking like this. So that's why I did that, not with any other purpose, of just wanting to have been as clear as I could be, and the votes could be the vote. So, I mean, I know, and part of it was in response to, I know, Robert, you were giving me the opportunity at the last meeting to say more. It's just, that's as clear as I could be, or could be.
No,
now.
but I have it, so I'll,
Okay,
take, make
thanks.
sure I'm reading.
Thanks.
Okay,
Okay. Because you sent it and it's your clarity, I want to talk to you about it, not rebut it, but talk about it. So the way you phrased it, you believe that your contention is that that parking is often very light, and that why on earth should this have to be in place when parking is not high, right? Okay. It's a tough call, really, in my opinion.
I agree. I will say one of the things too, and because I was thinking about this since our last meeting, one of the other things we were trying to combat initially was the rainbow map of every block having different parameters of when you could park.
Right.
And so I think that's another thing that the 24 hours does. And, I totally agree that a lot of things come down to, policy, no policy, but what works for residents. But I'm afraid that what works for residents would end up being a different time period on every block, just like we have now. So unless we could set some sort of other parameters on that, but then we start putting so many rules in place around this.
Right.
It gets.
Does the city have any metric of how often an emergency vehicle could not get to a scene, to a location?
Well, I was talking with my husband about that exact same thing.
It seems to me that the city should make a decision about this street is 24/7 at their discretion for safety. We've had 3 fire trucks that couldn't get someplace, kind of a decision. Or that it could be a certain time of day, but it's not going to be very flexible. It's got to be either, 8 to 5 everywhere or something. Because you don't, like you said, you don't want to rule everywhere 7 to 4, whatever. Your contention that streets are often very empty is well understood. I accept that. The concept that I don't want to not have my house be saved at midnight because it was an unusual day also is, but I see both of those, but I don't know where a city should go.
I'll just say, once this conversation is out there, you just opened up liability for the city if they elect not to put it on a street in a 24-hour way.
But that's
And
true.
then something happens.
Yes, but that's true of stop signs too.
It is.
And every rule they have.
But every stop sign nobody's come to the city and said, this is an area, this is an issue. And then they've said, usually they do an engineering study, and so they have that legal
Right.
backup.
Mhm.
We don't have an engineering study necessarily for this, so.
When you say engineering study, is that what they've been conducting lately for speed and things like that? Or is that a more expensive, comprehensive thing?
So for stop signs, you'll find out the next time we get asked for one, there's a comprehensive study that gets done, and there's a set of warrants, requirements that you meet to put a stop sign in. So it is dependent on volume of traffic and other factors at play. So there's a very clear kind of checklist. And if you don't meet the checklist for a stop sign, if a city doesn't install it, the legal liability isn't there because they've done their due diligence.
Yes, no, I appreciate what you're
Yeah.
saying. So
And you know, one thing I would add, and again, this is anecdotal, and you're not gonna get the data that you're wanting. I mean, honestly, it's just not there
Right,
or
I get that.
available. A lot of it is just, it's just not available. But my anecdotal observation is that these streets, when it is off-peak hours, they're not parking on both sides anyway. I mean, there isn't that much demand for street parking in Webster. And I've taken, you know, the streets that are, again, that are fully restricted, resident only during these time periods, there are 10%, 5% of the spaces are being used. So I mean, personally, I think Steve and I are probably on different sides of this issue. I'm not worried about if we're restricting parking to one side from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm not worried about that other time because it's not in demand.
right, it's not a problem for the residents any more than it's
And
a
I'm-
problem commonly for the fire department to get down the street.
And I'm more for making this simple. I mean, that's my position, as simple as possible. And if you look at the rainbow or whatever you call that, Carrie, in fact, it's not simple. And I don't even know how we're really enforcing how it is now.
Clark,
Yes,
can you just clarify really fast? So you are supporting timed restrictions only during the school day, is that right?
no.
You're the
I
opposite.
I am 24/7. If my position is that if someone goes to our guidelines and their street is, you know, 17 feet wide or whatever, and we say no parking, that's 24/7.
But why wouldn't we make an exception and make the rule fit the neighborhood around a high school? Because that's a very exceptional circumstance, right? Isn't it just common sense to make the rule apply when needed because of very specific needs around a high school?
I don't think that's the same issue.
So,
I don't see it that way because if there's a family has a party and they load up both sides of the street and there's a fire on that street, that may not be a frequent occurrence, but it's still a disaster for the people involved. Now, that may not be important here. I mean, I'm trying to say, you know, there are things that are diminishing risk, right? Maybe so diminishing risk that that's not what we're here to solve.
And I don't think I quite understood the question.
It's my fault.
I don't think we're punishing that neighborhood in off-peak time. Because they'll still have, you know, they'll have the spots that were reserved for residents, plus all the other spots that were shared available to them.
Can I just throw in it's a different circumstance than living around the high school, but living on an older, narrow street that's always been parking on one side, there is a lot of, there are a lot of issues with parking on my street, especially if someone has a party so it can be a problem for the residents. But you learn to live with it, just from that perspective of living on a street with restriction all the time. But again, we know it's for safety, so nobody objects. But again, it's always been that way. We're not changing that. No one's changed it in a long time. So I just want to throw that in.
Yep, okay.
Is it respected, Susan? Because what I've noticed is.
Oh,
someti-
yes, because there are signs and it would be very difficult. People can get through if someone parks, like if you have someone coming to give you an estimate on your house or about something, they will sometimes park there, but it can be difficult to get through. But it is respected by the residents, definitely.
okay, I want to again kind of pull us back. I sincerely hope that we don't spend this time on each and every one of these. So with that in mind, I really would like to vote on the first one. Okay, do I need to state it again? So that
Well-
Would you state it one more time? I'm sorry.
Well, law enforcement has to enforce these rules. I have not heard, and we may not be able to because of the nature of this. How hard is it to enforce the 24/7 narrow street provision? I mean, is this a burden? Do you expect it to be a burden and so on? I mean, what does it mean to police if this were to go in effect 24/7 or 8 to 5?
Typically, you'd be called, I mean, called.
So if there's an ordinance, we're going to enforce it. So if it becomes an ordinance, it will be enforced, and that could either be through observation or through complaint. Depending on the nature of the day, that kind of influences which one of those two it is. If we're busy, then, you know, maybe parking's not a major concern, you know, we're responding to other type of calls for service. But by and large, if it's, as I said up front, if it's an ordinance that gets passed through the city, it's our obligation to enforce it. And I do feel as though people kind of let us know where they want us to focus our attention, and hopefully we're responsive to that.
I mean, we have speed limits that aren't 100% enforced because it's impossible. I think at times in this thing, if there's no parking on this side and there's a repeat offender, the neighbor or whoever will call in a lot of instances.
Okay, so if there was a street, regardless of what happened with this suggestion here, if a street was parked in a way that was unsafe for fire vehicles, and I called, would you all come and ask people to move? Would you have no options? What would the city do?
Okay, you want to answer?
I'll just respond out of an experience that we had a street blocked to a path that was about 8'6". One of them was a trailer with tree company, and somebody called, a car that couldn't get through, got on their cell phone, police came. The officer went to the tree crew and said, I don't know who parked here first, and he drove off. So I was really unhappy with that. I think I reported that to Greg at a meeting. But that was an example of a response.
But on my street, people have been ticketed if someone calls and they have been parked a while on the side with no parking. I have seen the police ticket cars.
Obviously, that's not the kind of message we want to send, and I apologize for that response, and hopefully it was addressed. I would say, I'm losing focus on where the question was.
There's no restrictions in place. Is there any mechanism to ask people to move? I think that's what you're asking, right?
If the street becomes unsafe, where you clearly could not get a fire truck down it.
I mean,
But there's no restrictions.
It ultimately comes to the discretion of that officer and what needs to be done. A lot of times it can be handled in a bunch of different ways. You could run the plate, figure out who the owner is and ask them to move. Or you can ticket the vehicle, or if necessary, tow. I mean, if you have a substantial amount of cars that are parked in an area and it's just impassable, then Paul's looks like he's gonna talk here in a second, but yeah, we'll address it as it comes. So what I'm trying to say in long and short is there's no cookie cutter approach to how we respond to it. Just depends on the situation.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. So I know during the day, I know whenever we get calls and complaints about, again, like a tree crew or say one of the million contractors we have working throughout the city, I would be the one to go out and say, hey, what's your guys' status? You guys need to move. Because normally we've had it where they block driveways or they blocked just whole streets off. And it's like, hey, you need to notify us in advance for that. And when it comes to long-term parking, obviously that's out of our jurisdiction a little bit, but I know at least during the day, we kind of try to intervene a little bit. And then if obviously it gets to the point to where it's like, hey, they're not working with us, then we contact, PD, and they'll come out there and be, hey, you need to move. So that's usually at least what we have on our wrap for, what we handle. Kind of, I've had to do that multiple times throughout the months. That's it's fairly common for us, actually. Not getting PD involved at least, but at least being like, hey, this is your first warning at least.
I suppose this is the most contentious issue that we need to discuss. But I do think it's 6:07, and so I wanted to support Chris's idea that we should maybe address this and move on.
So
Thanks, Ann.
I appreciate that. So if the question
I
is
also
that-
support you, Robert. I think you're smart to want to talk it through, but at some point we just have to move forward. But y'all are doing great.
so 24/7 is one choice. I don't know what the other choice is. What is the alternative to
The alternative
24/7?
would be part of the time it's in place,
Right.
part of the time it's not.
Part of the time isn't a time frame. When?
Well, my suggestion was that to fit the problem. So if it's high school parking, then it's school hours. If it's parking on Marshall where the new cafe is, then it's maybe morning hours. It depends where the problem is and the times of it.
I'm somewhat uncomfortable with that, the randomness of it. I mean, I know it's not random, but I mean, the difficulty of dealing with what street am I on? What time is it? I think that's the reason.
I agree with Robert on that.
But the signage would state it, wouldn't it? Would the signage state it? Because I've pulled up in many parking spots and thought, oh, can't park here 5 to 9 or whatever, and then I just know.
Does that satisfy your question or?
Well, I think we would want to state clearly that we would set the time for the location.
Based on the circumstances?
Yes.
Okay,
I think that comes in the rewriting of it after our votes.
right, after the votes.
I think this is trying to get to sort of a consensus, and then we rewrite, then we would vote on the whole
Right,
ordinance again and make any tweaks at that time.
right.
Carrie, you had said you didn't like the idea of it being different places. What are your thoughts?
Just that, we at one point got a map of the area around the high school and almost every block has a different rule. Just like Ann said, it's on the sign, but that means different signage on every block. You can turn a corner and be in a different area.
One side of the
Different.
street is different than
One
the other.
side of the street's different than the other, and neither one is no parking. One of them is these hours and one of them is these hours, but for residents. And I think one of the initial ideas was to try to streamline that. So for one thing, I would think but I would think for, if the police got a call that someone's parked on my side of the street, all they need to know is that a no parking side of the street 24/7? Or then do they have to flip through rules and say, well, it's 8 AM, that might be a 7 AM street, or it might be a 9 AM street, or whatever. But
Carrie,
it just
I thought-
streamlines it.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I thought that, I love what you're saying, but I thought that you'd specified and there was like a very commonsensical line around the high school or perimeter around the high school. And so I thought there'd be sort of one set of rules that made a lot of sense. And it wouldn't be street by street, it'd be around the high school, it's these rules. And then once you've gone past like a somewhat arbitrary line, it shifts. So there would be a lot of common sense to it. And I feel like that's the norm at other public high schools. I'd have to drive over to Kirkwood, but I think that's really normal to have the streets around the high school to a certain distance, having one set of rules versus other streets.
So Ann, if I could clarify a minute. The part that I think does apply or may apply near the high school would be the idea about shared parking. But this is about whether emergency vehicles are gonna have a safe passage on that street. And so I don't think it makes sense to have these different rules for different times. You can either drive your fire truck down the street or you can't. And we do not ever want to have the situation where you cannot get a fire truck down a street.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess my only pushback is that, number one, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have that fear of litigation. But the residents came to us with a specific problem, wanting a specific fix. And it looks like we looked at that and we were like, oh, and this whole big other thing, we can create safety at all times for all people. So it feels like we went big when we perhaps should just be addressing a smaller problem. And from what I've heard, fire trucks there hasn't been a fire or deaths caused by this problem, because really it's only a problem during high school hours. And I don't want to make light of danger, but I don't want
And-
us to go overboard.
And again, and I think what we're doing is setting up guidelines that when people come with an issue, you can apply those guidelines to that issue.
I want to reiterate that this started with us looking at high school. And as we had more conversations, people kept weighing in. But I think it started with us saying these rules are arbitrary and all over the place. And how can we make this something streamlined so that
And more
one
fair
block
and more
fair
equitable.
and more equitable, so one block doesn't get one set of rules and one block doesn't get another set of rules, just based on who they know and who they ask.
Exactly.
So.
Right,
I
that
think
makes a lot of sense.
this got conflated along the way heavily with high school, but it's not just about the high school.
It could be a theater or whatever it might be.
Yes.
So we are talking about recommending a legal thing. So I mean, I do think it's important, unfortunately, that we put enough time into
Well,
it.
the city attorney will write the ordinance.
That's fine, but
We don't do, we're giving a recommendation here.
yes,
They, when they create the ordinance, they're going to go through and make it.
that's
legal.
fine, but that doesn't change my point. That if we are vague in our direction, then the permanent thing will be a vague thing.
Which is why we went with 24 hours. It's not
Well-
what we thought, I guess not all of us thought we were, but those of us who thought we were going 24 hours, that's why, because it's not vague.
So Steve, this is trying to accommodate your concept here. And I'm not even saying that this is my side, but I do want to accommodate an idea that the width, if the width were to apply to solve a defined regional, not street problem, I'm a lot more comfortable with it because the problem is if it's by street, well, this street, because of your high school situation, if there are 20 streets, if you say to fit the problem, and I'm just saying that's too vague, then there could be 20 times, right? I don't like that idea at all for the.
Isn't
all
that one of
reasons
the
you've said.
points down below?
But the point is to define the region and that we say we're defining a region. It is the high school, it is the theater, it is
Well, we're
the
gonna talk,
park.
we're gonna talk about that in another section. Number 5, how will neighborhood areas be defined?
Okay, but that just means that this has to be stated as an area, not a street.
Well,
To me,
again,
that's not clear, so.
well, if we can address each and every one of these, then we'll have a clear picture about what needs to be written into the.
Okay, but they have to cross-reference each other.
Of course. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else want to speak up before we vote?
I'd like
Okay.
you to just clarify 24/7, one set of times, or times that fit the need. Those are the three choices. You can discard one of those quick if you want to, but
No, there's only two choices.
We
no,
only-
I said
only-
a
no.
set time for the whole city. Okay, 24/7, whole city. 7 to 7, whole city.
Not whole city.
Or, no, I'm saying that seems to me to be.
The only issue we're talking about now is it's either 24/7 or something else.
Well, what we're talking about is a
Well,
guideline.
you
for
should
the
set the
city, so
gu- you
for
don't
Robert's
just-
sake, It is a guideline. for
Okay,
the-
so the guideline would be if the, if the width of the street dictates a certain parking system, one side of the street, both sides of the street, or no parking at all. If that's designated, then that would occur at all times, weekends, during this week, 24/7. That's one option.
Right.
Okay, the other option is if there's going to be a restriction on the, based on the width, just based on the width, then that restriction could be part-time on, part-time off. Those are the two options.
For an undefined time in an
And
undefined
to-
location.
To be based
that's
on the
fine.
location.
Yeah.
Okay,
No, location, the words do matter, location defined by.
Well, this will be rewritten, and if we need to change a word or something, we can do that at that time. I think we need to get through these.
If we do
Oh,
that, we'll all come back here again for another working
Okay.
session because we still didn't have it.
the whole
clear.
point of doing all this is to meet the needs of the local neighborhood. So if the local neighborhood, by whatever means they choose, have decided they want this restriction and they want it from 8 to 10, that's when we'll do it.
Huh?
I'd like to make a cloture motion, which means I just learned this word to end debate. So I think we need to either vote to push our vote on this back, our final vote on this back, or vote on it and move ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that, Ann.
I just think we need to call this to a vote, and we could vote to postpone our decision on this piece and move to the other pieces and circle back to this. Or just go ahead and vote on it so that we can keep moving ahead.
I heard a question. I didn't hear the answer.
Second?
We're very close to a vote. It sounds like we either want to vote on 24/7 for the width or 24/7 and a time to be defined by the need, or do we say a third option that is a 7 to 7? I don't think we
A broader.
a broader one.
Yes, that is.
Okay.
Asking, but it's-
Well, the problem with that, it has to be a yes or no, one or the other. It can't be three because we never, as a quorum, we'd never get a majority.
Right.
I propose that if we vote no to 24/7, then the yes will be a different discussion that will
Yes.
add a further discussion on that, on then what it should
Okay.
be.
Thanks, Carrie,
Yes.
for clarifying. Okay, is anyone not clear on that?
And this is for the width, not the shared.
Width, yes, width only, the number of parking lanes. Okay, all in favor of having 24/7 restriction on those streets that have restricted parking lanes, 1, 2, or 0. I'd like, yeah, I want all in favor of doing that. 24/7. Now, do we need to do a roll call here?
Yes.
Okay, so Ann?
Here, oh, am I voting? I thought you were roll calling.
We are voting, but here's sort of uncertain.
I would like to vote no on 24/7. Sorry for anybody that
Okay.
angers.
Okay, so Ann is no. Susan?
I am yes.
Okay. Carrie? Yes. Clark?
Yes.
Steve?
No.
Abstain.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. And my vote is yes. So we have, okay, who am I missing?
That, you're not.
I have 4
4, 2,
people.
1. 4,
Okay.
2, and 1 abstention.
Oh, it's, yes, 4, 2, and 1. Okay. All right. That one is resolved. So it's going to be 24/7 for all time. Now, the second part of this. Let's see, is that? No, that is number 1. Okay, so the parking restriction, well, no, that's 1A. We still need to talk about,
But you know, 1B, I sort of take that back on 1B. Because on resident only, the other spots can be parked by residents.
Yeah.
No, the point is when it's not in school.
I
Let's say in
know,
High school, that
but-
neighbors having a party who don't live in the neighborhood can park in residence. That's the point. So those we don't want to be, I mean, you're crazy if you went that 24/7 as well. Because then.
No, I'm just saying there shouldn't be an issue in off hours.
Well, if it says residents only, who's a resident?
okay, I need to think about what you're saying a bit. So your point is, Clark's point is that,
I hear Steve's point too.
okay, repeat your point.
Steve's point is that that the resident, the reserved spots for resident only should have time frame because in off hours, that should be open for everybody. Now,
If I were a resident, wouldn't I want it to be 24/7? Wouldn't I want that space of, that I sort of claim as my own, wouldn't I want that 24/7?
Well, it's the guests who are coming over to your house, who you don't
Yeah.
have stickers for, but you want to be able to park there. You're on a corner, so you'd have resident-only parking on both sides of your house, but they would be restricted from parking there. Your guests couldn't park there if it was resident-only 24/7.
Park in the middle of the block. Because.
Right, but it's a parking space. Why keep them away from parking in front of the house? I mean, that's the contention. Oh, why do we have to be so silly about pushing this stuff?
So you're saying that if I have a party, my guests who I've invited to be on my street can't use my resident parking?
They don't have resident stickers.
I say, I understand. I get it now.
The other side of that is sort of where you were going earlier. Why would they have priority over actual residents?
Okay,
The idea
Okay.
that I'm not having a party, you're having a party, and now I can't park on my street, even though I'm a resident.
But I mean, that happens now.
No, I'm just saying
Right.
that's the idea. I mean, it actually solves a infrequent problem, but it does solve an infrequent.
so the real,
Right.
let's back up 1 second and take a look at the bigger picture. The original reason this all came up was that non-residents were taking all the parking places so that, I mean, during the daytime, and it happened, in this case, it happened to be the high school, but it could have been a restaurant, it could have been a store, it could have been anything. So what we were trying to prevent was that all the parking places would be taken and the residents would be left to go find someplace else to park.
Right, I think this is a better protection for residents that claim that think that they own the parking in front of their house, personally. I mean, I live near popular restaurants. And it's whoever, I mean, I don't feel like I own that spot.
I don't either. Okay. Okay,
And just for the story, and not to waste time, but for an example, what restaurant do you live near?
Olive and Oak
Okay.
and Bristol School that has events,
lots of.
you know,
parking.
lots of evening events. And the block, I mean, a lot of.
We find the teachers are parking on our street too,
Right.
all day long.
Teachers?
Yeah. Okay, so. The question on the table is. It either is gonna be, the resident parking is only gonna be part-time or full-time. That's the issue on the table. Okay, is there any other unclear part of that we need to address? Okay,
It's a good to Rob's defining what are the hours.
well, yeah, we'll have to do that later if we choose to do that, but. Okay. Are we in a position to vote on this one? Wow, that was a record.
Right.
Yes, okay. So, Ann and Susan, are you comfortable and ready to go?
Yes.
Okay.
Was that a vote?
No.
Here.
So the two options you can choose from are 24/7 or only as for a period to be determined later.
So it was yes to 24/7 or no.
Yeah, yes to 24/7 or no. So Ann?
Here, just kidding. I'd like to vote last, please.
Okay, fine.
I'm gonna see what the popular people vote and then make my decision.
Susan?
Well, I'll be unpopular and vote yes.
Okay. Carrie?
I'm just following Susan tonight. I'm gonna vote yes.
Robert?
Abstain.
Okay. Steve?
No.
No. Clark.
And I didn't even thought about this one. I mean,
We
I
need
see
more
both, I
discussion.
see both, I see both sides. I will vote, if I vote no, again, it's to be defined because, you know, an area that has shared parking during the school hour might be different than one that
I
has a
know.
nightlife, right?
I know. Every street is gonna have its own combination.
Not every street, every neighborhood.
Every potentially
Yeah.
busy, you know, so the people like by Crossroads,
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's a new area that has some of this conflict,
Yeah.
so I am gonna vote. I'm gonna vote no.
Okay. Thanks, Clark. I am voting yes. And we're back to, no, Ann, it's up to you.
Now you can tell who I think is popular. I would like to vote no.
No,
Kidding, just kidding, but no, yes, I'm voting no.
no, yes?
No, no, hard no.
Okay, so that one does not pass.
3-3.
3-3. It's a tie. Right.
Let's talk about the other issue.
All right, we can do that. So,
I motion that maybe this will become.
yeah, maybe so. All right, thank you all. This has been a struggle. Now we're down to question number 2. Will parking restrictions that apply only in areas where they're requested, or will they apply to all streets throughout Webster Groves? Comments, suggestions, feedback?
I will restate what I said before, that these are guidelines and it's unfair, a burden. I think we've heard from the city manager and from Public Works. You can't just
Willy-nilly.
willy-nilly this and have a million. I
Yeah.
think it's, as it comes up, these are guidelines to make decisions by.
Right.
So I get the point of not burdening the city. I agree with it. But it's almost as though that's not a rule. I mean, you need to say, we anticipate that in 50 years, this will be 100% set. And it's a question of prioritization, not willingness. And that when people ask for it, they're really trying to move themselves to the top of the line. Which I get, it may be it may take 50 years before we get everywhere, and I don't care about that. But to say it's just meh, absolutely undefined for implementation, that just doesn't seem like.
Well, I think we have an implementation process,
Yeah.
and I think these are guidelines that,
I don't think on request I don't think it should be, we will only do it because it was asked for. I think it should be, we'll move you to the top of the line if it's asked for, but we expect safe rules to be applied everywhere. I don't expect safe rules to not just, if we decided it was a rule, it's a rule. It may take a while, like, almost like to say, we expect 25 streets a year to be done for the next 100 years or something.
yeah,
But
I think
they-
that's above our scope.
But I think that the by request is the strangest thing of this thing, that since we've chosen to ignore what's exactly requested, then to say that request is what matters here doesn't make any sense at all to me. So I agree that we're not going to spread it across the whole city, but the last point in the notes I made was to think that the city can't do anything unless it's requested is bizarre.
It's not, they can't do anything. I think we're saying that.
Well, it says.
Those people have the closest idea of if there's a problem. I wouldn't have known that there's a problem on Swan if I lived, on Glendale.
Well, this says
I'm just
they
saying.
will apply only to areas where they are requested. That's pretty clear to me.
Okay, well, I don't agree with that language.
I think that's the language of upon enactment of this. They're just gonna, yeah, I guess only where they're requested. That's the way we're doing it now. That's the way it's been done now.
Right.
And I think it's not saying you're not important. It's saying, do you feel that that safety is an issue on your street, which is what people come to us now with parking restrictions about. So in response, I think we were responding with something uniform and equitable, not responding with, we don't care when you say you have a problem, we're going deeper. We were just trying to respond with something
Or
that's.
if this
equitable.
council, this traffic advisory council might sort of see things different than the one 2 years from now, we're trying to apply some guidelines that decisions like this can be made. I think that that's a good aspiration. I think it's called out in our beginning of why we're doing this. We're trying to do this to make it fair and equitable and safe. I mean, that's pretty clear to me what our goal is. I think to say we're gonna have this done in 100 years is just not
Well, okay,
possible
no, that's
or
fine.
reason.
I'm already, I acknowledge that. All right, I'm okay with that. But this, an example of a stop sign is sort of a good example, to me, would be helpful. Because are there ever cases where stop signs are required by law? Absolutely. It's not about the conditions. Two, 4-lane streets intersecting always have stop signs, or, I know they can be requested, but I think there are cases where they're enforced without request. This is kind of the same thing in a way,
Wait,
or,
that's the traffic engineer here.
I was gonna say, I think the city can install them, but they usually do a study. So our basic is the right rules of the road. So at its most basic, everybody follows the rules of the road. You yield to the right or yield to the left. I don't even know what they are. But if you pull up to a stop and there's no stop signs. So there isn't
Every
there
100
isn't
feet, you have
you
to.
must put a stop sign at this location.
Okay.
But
well, so the other part of that. Thank you. I mean, that's what I need to know.
yeah,
But also, it seems that what you inferred is that the request doesn't have to be a citizen request. It can be a city request. Like in a certain sense, the police see accident at an intersection 10 times in 6 months. No one has to ask. They may just say, we're going to put a stop sign in. Now, I might be wrong about how that works. Maybe I have to raise my hand, but obviously someone will. I mean,
they have to do the study. They do have to do a study. They don't just go out and put a stop
yes,
sign up.
okay, but it didn't have to be requested. They
No,
could have
well-
said, this is a danger. We're going
Oh,
to
yeah.
move
But
forward.
then technically they're request.
No, right, but that's what I mean, is
Yeah.
just that that's either it's implicit or we say it.
Yeah. So I think this is just the ones that come from residents on their street, when they see a need for a stop sign. And I think likewise, the city can go in and put no parking for whatever reasons they want, but this is when a citizen comes to us and says, we want no parking for this reason,
But I think that was Steve, was that your?
Yeah, I mean, I
you
think,
want to make sure that that this can be applied.
Right.
Not just by a street saying they want it.
Right.
But if the police or the city manager or whatever, they can apply these guidelines to any street.
right,
Right?
yeah.
And
So I think the
it
first part of
sounded
that-
too
Yeah,
restrictive.
that needs to be rephrased.
So requested is the word. And I apologize, because I wasn't supposed to be available tonight, but I'm sneaking in between two engagements, so I have to run.
Oh, okay,
But I was.
Sorry
here
to hear
for
that.
the 55 minutes.
yeah. Carrie, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so let me clarify because I'm got a little lost there. So what do you want the proposal to say? Will parking restrictions only apply in areas where they are requested or apply to all streets throughout Webster Groves?
Well, let me ask, is it enough to say something about these guidelines or this proposal is available to apply throughout the city? Is that enough?
Yeah.
Do we need at this point to say how it's implemented by request or not? Granted, that is sort of.
These
how it's on the
guidelines-
Table.
Can apply to any street
Yeah.
in the city.
Yeah, yeah, and leave out request at this point. I mean, do we need to guide that?
Oh, okay.
Because I think the implementation will deal with
Yeah.
how that
Exactly.
would be applied.
Yeah.
So I'm really puzzled.
Wait, so let me, I think, so I don't mind that it says requested. I'd like for it to also say, or for safety necessity, meaning that it could come to us and we could ask for it, a citizen could ask for it, the police could ask for it. Does that help or not?
Yeah. It doesn't give priority to one or it. That sounds good to me. It doesn't give priority to one or the other. So either when safety issues are raised or policy implementation is requested.
I think you're combining these two sentences basically to say, these guidelines may apply to all streets throughout the city, based on requests by the residents or by safety measure, something like that. I think that's covering both of those questions into one. Because
Okay.
I think the second part of that, or will they apply to all streets, is more of an implementation thing.
So I don't think that, and I'll tell you why. I think we all know that there are areas in the older part of the community where the housing is more congested, more, more dense. This is a problem. There are plenty of newer suburbs within Webster Groves around the area where you got all the room you want, any time of day or night. Those people we don't need this and we don't want it. So I think it
And
does,
nobody's gonna tell them they have to do it either, right?
well, from what you're telling me, anybody could say, oh, I want to implement this on this street, and they would potentially be granted it
Well,
for any reason.
the city owns the streets.
No, you understand though, that if we don't say specifically requested by the neighborhood, we're making a situation where one person in a neighborhood could request it and potentially be granted it.
But what
Yeah,
happened
we've
to your
already said
safety?
51.
What happened to your safety?
No, I'm not
Was
talking
that-
about safety. I'm talking about the idea that it's gonna be, resident only or not resident only. Those are the
But
restrictions.
the resident guidelines are 51% or above have to
Are
come
they?
forward.
Is that written someplace?
Yeah,
Yeah, Carrie has made note of some of that.
that's why it wasn't in
So
here.
that's
because
not what we're talking about. We're talking about
No, like
the lanes, the parking lanes.
Well, unfortunately, you have to make this decision for both of them.
Yeah.
Between the width part and the restriction part independently, because one of them you might not want based on request and one of them you might.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true.
I would say, I mean, my feel, and just, it's not just a silly thing, because to me, the parking restriction really is helping the citizens as they request. I can't park on my street, I want to park on my street.
Right.
The width thing is
It's different.
a person could claim, remember I abstained, could be that I feel that it's unsafe and I don't want to have to be asking, I just want it. Or, it should just be there. I mean, they're two different, the sense of these two things feel like they're addressing different citizen concerns. So I think separating them is valuable.
Do you remember when we were dealing with something about Barack Hill and we sent that citizen to solicit his neighbors? I guess Robert's making me think of, if there's a situation that's brought to our attention and is unsafe, I feel uncomfortable sending that citizen back to say you need at least 50% of your neighbors to request this.
You're talking about now about safety,
Right.
meaning.
Yeah, I
meaning-
mean, that's what,
You're talking really about parking. the
Lane
number of
width.
Parking.
yeah.
Right, so the idea of request by citizens, that's why I think adding something rather specific or at the request of the Traffic Advisory Council. Just because we're like, look, it's obviously dangerous and they don't have to all vote for this. For goodness sakes, let's do it, right? I mean, I'm not saying it has to be us as an authority, it could be Public Works. I'm not concerned about who it is, but something outside the citizens who are in fistfights in their yards because of how they voted on the thing.
I mean, the other obvious one that is brought to our attention is Newport. And that's been implied that a solution there is going to follow this discussion. It's not up to us, I think, but it appears that it's a real problem. When cars are parked there after work hours. And I don't know what the resolution.
So that would be
is.
an example when, maybe the neighbors want one thing. but
Right.
The people who are driving on that street. want-
Right.
that
Exactly.
It's their safety that, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that we want this to be requested by citizens. Doesn't have to be the neighbors. Requested by citizens. And maybe those citizens are this committee, or this commission.
I think there's a process for this, and we're working through that process, right? So you get a request, it will come through the form. I will distribute that form to you. with a specific request. And that's, in my belief, what this committee's design is to address individual, it gives them a process to follow, a step-by-step process. And from there, a solution is, you know, you get together, you collaborate, you decide what the solution is for that particular problem, and then you move on to the next issue. Where I think we're getting tied up and kind of out of is what the role is. I think there's some argument over what your all's role is.
Right.
But I can say, my understanding of it as a liaison is you guys are supposed to address things as they come to you individually, as they are filtered to you through me as a liaison.
Mhm.
So, I would like us to just try to stay on focus with step-by-step issue and not get into the broader spectrum of like safety, and that's for the engineers and things like that. And those issues get brought up to the city through other avenues as well. But the purpose of this panel in general is to address specific complaints that get brought to you through that form that we're going to be. And then also there'll be a form where you guys can provide your recommendations, and I will forward that through the city as well. So we are going to streamline this process and hopefully make it clear, but I think we're getting off track personally.
Doesn't that suggest that this entire meeting is off track? All of it?
I'm not, listen, I'm not gonna talk about that. I mean,
I think we're getting it into too many details. I
Yes.
think we had this proposal out, there was a little bit of confusion. Our goal is then to give it up to the city for them to decide what to do with it. And they might rewrite it, they might take it out, they might, exactly. And I think,
But it's very important what you've said earlier, that what we're interested in are guidelines, we're not gonna make the decision once and for all. We're gonna have guidelines, and then if somebody has a proposal and it doesn't make any sense,
right,
we say, okay, that doesn't fit the guidelines, or.
and we're recommending guidelines for the city to create a parking ordinance that will
Right.
cover the city.
Right.
I mean, I think we're getting way too into the weeds.
Okay,
Excuse me, this is Susan.
hi, Susan.
Hi, I'm on vacation actually, and we have dinner reservations. So I have to leave the meeting, so I apologize. So just wanted to let you know, sorry for interrupting.
Are you somewhere fun?
North Carolina at the beach.
All right. Are you on Cape Hatteras or are you like?
No,
somewhere-
farther south, Emerald Isle. It's
All
about
right.
3/4 of the way down the
What the
coast.
hell are you doing with us?
I admire you coming this far.
Yeah,
Well,
our chair
I
never,
was
our chair
afraid we
never
would-
joins when he's on vacation.
I was afraid we wouldn't have a quorum or something, and so anyway, I'm glad I attended. So
Yeah,
carry on.
thanks again.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Okay,
Wait, Ann, you have to keep saying here, so we know you're still here.
Here. I may also be shopping online, but I am here and I'm listening.
So I would suggest that we don't need to vote on number 2.
Okay, so how would we, the whole goal of this meeting was to clarify, so how would we clarify this so that it's clear to everyone?
Well, that's not a point we need to make. That
Right,
doesn't serve the city.
because we've established parking guidelines. I mean, that's what we've done.
Our process already is when things are brought to our attention. We don't need to
Period.
clarify that,
Okay.
rather than
Okay.
adding to that confusion.
Okay,
I agree.
so really, it's, when it comes to us, we will deal with it. Okay. When proposed. Thank you. That's a good solution. Number 3, what portion of residents in a neighborhood area must request parking restrictions in order for the request to be considered and approved? Clark, you said earlier that 51%. But is it 51% of all the neighbor? Do you actually poll the neighbors when this comes up?
I think they come, and is it households? Is it like
number of people in housing.
I think it's households.
Like if your street has 5, 6, 12 houses on it,
Right.
if 7 houses come forward. But I think what Carrie said is why it wasn't in there earlier, is she said we would just do what's already in place for other things like the sidewalk policy and
And that's where the 51% came from?
yes, I think so.
So a
There's two numbers
majority.
in there. It's a bit confusing, but yeah, I think,
Well, what I worry about, of course, is that we get a petition and there's 10, we don't go out and count that.
Right.
The residences, we go ahead and we enact it. Now 12 come back to us and say, wait a minute, you,
And again, based on authority, again, I don't think it's gonna fall under Traffic Advisory Commission to go, when these come forward, this isn't, our job is putting forward this recommendation of a policy.
Yeah.
We're not the ones gonna be enforcing it and implementing it.
you know, so that solves. the
so we
problem.
don't need to count noses. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, if city, if police say this is unsafe, regardless if just one person pointed it out or 51% does, it's their job to respond.
Okay, so we're gonna take this off.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
That's fine.
hearing. Okay. So, okay. Not a vote of the households. And who would do that then?
Who would do what?
If this came to us, 3 people. All right, okay, that would
Let
be
us know
helpful.
at the next meeting.
Cause I'm worried that people are gonna be miffed if their neighbors, changed the rules on them and didn't tell them. And okay. Number 4. Will parking restrictions requests be applied street by street, or could larger areas request approval?
For me, the value of street by street is what we're going through. When you change one area, you see where it impacts the next area. And so to have been proactive about plant and have put restrictions there until we saw what the volume was would have been premature. So that's the value of street by street for me.
I think area is too hard to define.
Well, wait a minute. If you had a petition, you know, right near the high school, let's say, for example, just as an example, and you went block by block and talked to everyone. If 10 of those blocks said, we want it, and 1 block in the middle said, nope, what are we gonna do with that? That's what I struggle with.
Right, can the election be by an area versus the election be street by street?
So I guess I got to think again about, are we talking about both issues, shared parking and street width issue?
Well, for the purposes of this discussion, I think either one applies.
So separately, but the same discussion.
So again, shared, all that means is it's protecting some of those spots
For your block.
for your block.
Just
So
for
if
your
one
block.
block said they don't care about it, who cares?
Who cares?
Then it's wide open
Right,
for anybody.
right.
So we're not doing anything about it. If these want to do it, I mean, that's why I think you can't really do it by an area.
Well,
So that, sure, that makes sense there, but on the width question, you don't want this street, yes, this street, no, this street, yes, this street, no.
I
around
agree.
High school, because that's,
Yeah.
but your point of do it on Swan, find out what happens on Plant, choose to do it on Plant, that makes sense too. So the problem is these are conflicting positive things.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, you guys are establishing, you guys are establishing that.
Yes.
So as these guys future requests, then we'll have that.
Oh, so you're saying like if the high school has a problem and that complaint comes to us, we would say, we recommend these 6 streets, or we recommend this one.
It realizes the problem, find how we're going to address that problem in the future, because, as complaints future, because as you can see, your point, it might not just be, the streets on the high school, it might be the street somewhere else.
Oh, yeah.
So these guidelines will help guide you in what you're.
I guess to me, the simplest way to say this is if there's a problem in a particular region, I'll use the word region, and it becomes important and one block says, this is what we want to do, and they do that. Then maybe the neighboring block and the next block over and the one down, you know, slowly it could be built up. But the other thing that could happen is a whole region could come together, have a private meeting in their little neighborhood, and they all decide that these 10 streets are all gonna go this way. That's fine. If each of those streets qualifies because they've decided they want to do it, in other words, they create their own area. That's what I'm really trying to say.
For me, a hidden element number 4 is what we've got now around the high school, that if we don't say it should be for the whole area, then we're forgetting our equity and fairness. That some folks who have barred high school students can live with that. By number 4. So if we don't do it by neighborhood, then that's wiggle room to say our principle of going backwards, you know, for streets that have had no parking for students, don't have to accept some.
So I would wish that this could be done by study. That is, you know, oh, the high school has a problem. We're going to do this width thing. But somebody with knowledge could say, well, if we do Swan, we'll affect Plant, but we won't affect the next one because we're engineers and we know this stuff. That'd be ideal. But I don't know that we really get that, right? We just have to be like, Swan, Plant.
Do we even have to say, do we even have to mention this?
Well,
In
my
other words,
reason for mentioning it is going back to Joy and Mason.
Well, that's number 8.
Well, they need to be consistent.
No, but it's the concept of, it's an abstract concept of you don't want to join a Mason
But
because you make
again,
bad choices.
We're going to a restricted and shared or free for all. We're not saying like, because they're going to restricted. They're more restricted than this others. You know what I mean? This is, to me, this is fair and equitable. If someone thinks they want to preserve some, we have a fair and equitable solution. If they don't think there's a problem, then we don't have to worry about it. Mason and Joy have gone, to me, beyond what our recommendation is and said, we want to hoard it all the time
Yeah, yeah,
for us.
yeah.
And that's where number 8 comes in. I don't think we have to mention whether it's done by an area or a street.
well, as long as we all agree that it's based on the way we said it was that if anyone comes to us with this request, then we would consider it.
Yeah, but if the guidelines are if 51% of
Well, is that?
10 streets are all
Okay,
in line,
wait,
then
here's
then
what
it's an area.
you could do this. You could say a vote of a street or a vote of an area. What that means is that a street could say no, but if they're inside a group of people who choose to come together, 5 streets, and the 5 say, we want this to be considered a group, and we're going to vote as a whole, not as individual streets. You could choose to allow it go both. If it's a street issue, it's a street issue. If it's an area issue, let them vote as an area
I
and
kinda
allow
like that.
either one.
But you're saying that there can't be an independent block in the middle of an area that chooses not to.
And I suppose that in a certain sense, well, it would depend on how they all come to us, right? Because if they all came one by ones, it could end up like that. If it was still a problem, they could come as an area.
Again, I think
Worry
we're
about
getting it. We're trying to put some guidelines together.
I know,
And
and we're struggling.
well, I don't see why this is a struggle,
Okay.
this particular one.
So do we just vote on 8 and skip number 4?
And again, 8 is one that I don't know if we can really, I mean, we can give the city our recommendation.
Well, that's,
But they might
okay,
say,
that's
we're not
what
gonna
this
go
is.
back and rescind.
all of this is giving them a recommendation.
number 8 is one of the stronger points.
Okay.
Right.
Or otherwise it's cross out here.
I think we vote on 4 because not voting on it is street by street. Voting on it is area or street. I mean, it's kind of I want to vote because otherwise, hey, you didn't let me vote.
I actually,
How
that's
much you want to
okay with me. We want to vote on it? Okay. So as it's written, are we only going to accept proposals for parking restrictions on a street by street basis? Or are we going to allow larger areas to come forward as well?
And I'm gonna say again, this is like more of an implementation
I
thing,
know.
right?
Yeah, I know.
So it's not, we're not accepting these.
Well, I mean, there's some logic to saying, no, everything is street by street because it's.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think it should be. But,
Okay, so then you can vote on
Okay.
street by street?
street by street.
So a yes is street by street.
Yes.
A no is
Street
either
by
for
street or
discussion
area.
later. Right.
But then you're gonna have to define area.
Well,
No, I would say that, okay,
Sure
the
you
way
will.
I see it is a group of people who come together just defining a problem. It's really a number of streets you want to
Well,
talk
if
to
we
each other
have in
and-
place, like Carrie said already, why we didn't define the 51%, because that's in place. How people come forward with
Oh.
wanting a change on their street, then you're gonna have to define what an area is.
An area
Well,
is a group
just-
of streets that come together,
Affected by.
making a request.
yeah.
Affected by an individual issue, problem.
But what you were saying earlier is these 4 streets can overrule this one street if no
Yes.
one wants, okay. Yeah, then I'm street by street.
Okay,
Neighborhood,
so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
neighborhood.
So you want to say street by street only, or street by street or neighborhood? Is that what I'm,
No, I think it should be, well, you're saying is it one or the other or one or both?
right,
Well, interestingly, an area can be a single street.
okay, so what did you say okay to?
So I just know, whatever, if you put in Clark as yay, then I'm no.
So, okay, so a yay is street by street only.
Yeah.
Nay is street by street or by the majority of a neighborhood. Okay. Okay, yes, yes is,
I hate to say it, but I wouldn't call it a neighborhood. I'd call it a collection of streets because neighborhood is
okay, yeah, it's
not
hard, it's hard to
Webster
define.
Park or
Hard to
whatever we're
define,
saying.
yeah. So yay is street by street and nay is, let me see if I can say this, either street by street or a collection of streets. Okay by you? Okay. And if you're still there,
Here.
would you say
Okay.
yay or nay?
I think I wanted the both and. Can you say that again for
Okay,
me?
so it could be street by street, or it could be a collection of streets.
Yeah, I like, well, if I say a collection of streets, am I saying also, could be a single street?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, then yes, I'd like that, please.
okay, so that's actually what you voted was nay,
Nay.
nay, okay, Robert.
No,
no. That's nay.
okay.
You're ornery.
You guys are cracking me up, but I just have my my mute on, just so you know. I love this discussion.
Can you see that my eyes are crossed on the camera?
Little bit, little bit.
Steve,
You're wearing sunglasses.
Got it.
nay, okay.
You can't vote twice. This isn't Chicago.
Yeah.
Clark,
I think you were the only one that haven't voted, because
Yeah.
Clark voted yay.
did you think, well, I didn't, it wasn't official until I
Oh.
called the
Okay.
roll.
Yay.
Yay? Yay. And I am a nay. So that is 4-1.
Well, now you gotta get it into number 5, which is
Yeah,
why I voted
well,
yay.
that actually, we actually solved this when we said it could be street by street or a collection of streets.
So eliminate 5.
Yeah. So 5 is resolved. 6, will parking restrictions be requested and granted in a 2-tier manner? So in other words, can you come in and request only the safety part, the lanes? Or do you have to take the safety part with the shared parking part? That's the question that's on the table.
I thought we'd effectively in conversation resolved it already that they're separate, but I mean,
And I'm leaning that way too, but I would just want to be clear.
I'm okay with them separate.
Yeah, they're.
Okay, so shall we make a formal vote?
Okay.
Anne?
Yes, I'm okay with that.
Okay,
Yes.
Steve? Clark?
Yes.
Yes, I'm okay.
yes.
Yes, all yeses. Wow, we're getting good at this. Number 7, if a neighborhood street or area,
Just, whoever's wordsmithing this, can't just leave it like in a two-tier man, it has to really just,
oh,
define
make
what
it,
that
define
means.
it. Yeah, must be defined.
With separate from.
Yes, for sharing. Sharing is the, yeah. Defined. Thanks, Clark. Okay, if a neighborhood street or area decides to cancel a parking restriction, how will this be done? And we talked about, it, I think, briefly at the last meeting, that you just come back to the, no,
No.
All right.
It's, again, it's a twofold question.
Okay.
So what you applied about width, that can never be canceled. So,
Oh.
I mean, otherwise, again. this
That's
is a
crazy.
Silly discussion.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So, which I don't agree with, which I vote no on.
Okay.
But the other part on the, resident only, sure, if,
if 51% come forward and say, we want this rescinded, that's the process.
Okay, I think that's pretty straightforward. Does anybody have an objection to voting on that way?
No, and I think that makes sense, because if the neighborhood turns over and there's new people that
The
live.
safety part should stay in place. That just makes sense.
well, that's gonna be the yes or no. I'm gonna vote no to that. But that's the sensible question, consistent with what we're doing.
Okay.
Or I guess it could abstain.
What I'm trying right now to do is to define a question. And what you're saying, Steve, is you could decline, you could choose later to opt out of the street width thing? No, I don't think that's possible.
That's what Steve says too.
Yeah, that's to be consistent with the effort.
Right.
I think you.
Oh, so you agree with that?
Well,
No.
How do I resolve my vote, Robert? You're the. Do I abstain?
well, if you, I really, if you feel like you don't care what, you believe the two outcomes are even is when I abstain.
Okay.
Where I'm like, I don't need to decide for people.
So the consistency with the arguments made to have 24/7 parking would speak against a neighborhood being able to change parking restrictions based on width.
We have to vote twice.
Yeah.
Are the.
Oh,
like, is the width-
well, maybe that's the way to do it. Let's just vote twice. All right, so the first question is, can a block or area rescind, was that the right word? Rescind their choice regarding street width, parking lanes?
But again, I mean. Yeah, I mean, that's not their choice. Once it's,
Well,
once
that-
our,
you can vote
once our
that.
guideline is implemented, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
once our guideline is implemented, which has the street width,
right.
one side, two side,
Mhm.
that can't be rescinded.
Well, I understand why you
That's
think
about-
that,
right.
but that's up to the, that's a point of,
But this isn't, the thing that's up to the neighbors is to say, hey, we have an unsafe area, this hasn't been applied yet. Look at our street, and then we look at the city comes through and says, nope, this is 14 feet wide, you can't park here.
Right.
They can't rescind,
It's an
if they
accelerant.
wanna then say, we wanna have parking here, no.
You can't.
that-
you can't.
It's an
because of the
acceleration
ordinance.
request.
I understand. I totally understand.
Yeah.
We may not implement it all on one day, but once it's implemented, it's there.
Correct,
Okay, that's your point.
exactly.
Okay,
And this is an and
Okay.
the city passes this, it's an ordinance.
got it. So for purposes of the first half of this, yay means they can restrict they can with.
I'm saying we shouldn't
I
even
know,
vote on it.
well, I know you are, but we're voting on it, because that's what we're doing here tonight. So,
I would say that, I would phrase it so that the yay is to not being able to change it. I mean,
Okay,
That's the
okay.
push you want to make to.
yay means no, you cannot change.
Right.
Okay. All right. Anne, how would you like to vote?
Can I actually go last on this one?
Say yes? Say
Go-
what
go-
now?
Can I go last on this one? I
Of
need to
course,
think about it.
Of
Yeah.
course.
I'll abstain.
Okay, Steve is abstaining. Clark, you're a nay.
I thought I was a,
Oh, yeah.
No, he's a-
You're a yay. You're a yay.
I'm a strong yay, and I can't even believe we're voting on this.
Yay. Okay,
honestly.
Robert.
Yay.
Yay. I am also a yay. So we have 3 yays and
And
Anne, you're up.
Yeah, I'll go yay.
Okay. So we have 4 yays and 1 abstain.
So Clark, your point carries.
Yeah. It was a struggle, I know, but you did a good job.
All right, now for the resident only part.
Yes, now for the resident only part. So now can,
So
a,
my example of this would be over there by the university off of Edgar, so they've got residential areas over there when college students used to park over there.
right,
If those folks,
they built a garage, so they don't really need that anymore.
perhaps, yeah, but I think when circumstances change in the neighborhood, they have a right to ask for that change.
yes,
So again,
I
rescind,
agree.
shared parking. Okay. Anne, would you like to weigh in?
I was distracted serving food to Francis, so you might have to fill me in. Sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry. So, in this one, it's whether or not a neighborhood or a street could rescind their request for shared parking. So yay would say that they can request and receive rescind that. A nay would mean it would have to remain as is.
I think they should be able to rescind.
Okay, yay. Robert,
Yay.
yay. Steve,
Yay.
Clark,
Yay.
yay, and I am a yay. So everybody says yes. Okay, that is number 7.
And how will it be done? It's the same process,
Yes, come and
whatever that process
make
is.
your request, or, yeah, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
it should be the same process. That makes sense.
Okay. Number 8. How will existing ordinances that are more restrictive be addressed? So presumably, if a neighborhood likes what they have, they wouldn't come forward,
Correct.
right? So if they come forward, they clearly want it to be different.
Yeah, but I think the whole point of this parking ordinance is a fair and equity.
Yes.
And I think what we've observed is some areas are not fair and equitable
Because.
Oh, that's right,
really-
because they're more restrictive than the shared parking.
and we said even in our discussion, this is probably before your time, Robert, that it wouldn't necessarily be for this, it would not necessarily be up to the neighborhood. That a group of citizens who drive on that street could say, wait a minute, we own the streets too.
So we have to redo our votes from prior.
No.
No, so,
This is just has to do with,
so this really, we can talk for about 3 hours on this. We need to sort of come to a decision of what we would recommend the city. They might say, we're not gonna mess with any existing ordinance.
that's right, they might.
We might, I think, if I was making a motion, I would say the question should be that we would like the city to implement the shared parking restrictions in areas that are more restrictive than the shared parking ordinance.
And add in the uniform, I mean, because Carrie, as she brought up
Right.
again tonight, the disparity in regulations.
Yeah.
For the sake of enforcement, so uniformity and equity and fairness. In any given area.
So there can be, we could write something that says there can be no restriction more restrictive than our shared park.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, I mean, that's our recommendation to council. They might just cross that whole line off and say, you know what, we're not gonna miss with the existing ordinances. It's too political.
Are there big donors on this?
Well, I don't
Not
think.
donors, but they're vocal, very vocal residents.
Yeah. Do you guys have a meeting in here?
All right, so it's pretty clear what we're voting. Either either we can write it in there that that no ordinance can be more restrictive than shared parking.
Or that I think how we would write it is that our recommendation is that the city apply our ordinance to areas that are more restrictive.
Right, without a vote or anything, just, that's it.
City, I want to catch the language on this one. I haven't on the other, but I want, so city will apply our
Our
ordinance.
guidelines,
Our guidelines, thank you.
our guidelines to existing ordinances that are more restrictive or something along.
Okay,
For the
yeah.
sake of uniformity, equity, and fairness.
Yes. Yes.
Well, not so fast. I can't write that fast.
Come on.
City will apply our guidelines to existing streets. Is that right?
Restricting ordinances
Oh, ordinances.
that are more restrictive
Okay.
than our guidelines for
For the sake of uniformity, fairness, and equity.
For this, okay, for the sake of
uniformity,
uniformity, safety,
Equity.
oh yeah,
Oh, equity.
safety and fairness.
Equity.
Those were our three words.
So now it's uniformity,
Safety and fairness.
Yeah.
safety and fairness.
Life isn't fair.
Yeah, but I want to live anyway. Okay, now here's the bugaboo on this one. What you're basically saying is that we're gonna do away with all these old restrictions
Well, that's what we're, yes, we're requesting.
citywide on the same day. We're back to the issue about requesting.
I don't know that there are very many of them, really. I mean, how many? 10, 2?
Oh, there's bunches.
No, they're more restrictive?
Oh, yeah, lots and lots of them,
Where?
all over around the high school.
No, okay, Joy and the other one.
Oh, no.
No, Swan doesn't have restrictions or we wouldn't be talking about
Selma,
Yeah.
we talked about that rainbow.
There's a whole rainbow.
Okay.
diagram.
I'm unsympathetic. I don't care. I really don't. I mean, you have the problem because you have to solve the problem, not,
Well,
let
don't get me
people
wrong,
not-
I totally agree with what we're saying. My question is has to do with implementation.
Well, that's not that's just not our, we can't think about that. We have to, this is our recommendation.
Okay.
That's why we have a public works, city manager, they will implement.
They will put it, okay, I got it.
okay, actually, I do appreciate, I mean, I'm trying to hear everything. We could say that the existing restriction could be removed now.
We went through this and Robert,
I'm sure.
a year ago, we went through this and they said you can't just wipe out all of these ordinances on one day. I mean, they went through the whole thing with us. So we're sort of I think through experience, we're putting this language together that they might listen to and say, yes, we want to do that. And in their timeframe.
I don't know that you've overcome that.
Well, we don't know either, but at the end of the day, I think what we want to do is
We want to say what our
say
recommendation is.
clearly what our recommendation is and let them figure out how best to.
Right.
The reason this is a problem is that each and every one of these streets was a whole ordinance all unto itself. So this was an ordinance, and this is an ordinance, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. Over a period of time, what, 20, 30 of them?
Yeah.
And they told us it can't be done, can't be done.
Okay, I still think that that doesn't mean we can't give any guidance. No, I understand.
We are giving.
No, no, the guidance I'm suggesting is that where safety is an immediate problem.
It's not a
No, it's
safety
not.
thing.
It's the opposite of.
These are
safety.
big, wide streets
they're
with
very
tons of
safe,
parking,
right.
and it's to keep, you know.
No, no, yeah.
Now, the neighbors would say, and that it's safer that you don't have high school kids driving up and down the street. So, I mean, there is an argument on both sides of that.
No, I'm trying to find a clause that lets you say. But there isn't. It just isn't.
I think we're there. Well, we need to vote on this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so yay is, just as I said, city will.
Just as you wrote.
As I wrote, city will apply these guidelines to existing ordinances that are more restrictive than shared parking.
Okay, actually, I'm
Or
sorry.
this-
I actually have an idea. We could ask them to do it in geographic proximity to the high school, closest, next closest, next closest. There's nothing wrong with us guiding that we feel it'd be best if you did it like this. The point is not leave them adrift. Yeah, they'll be like 30 streets, forget you. But if we said closest proximity, they'd have a priority order coming from us.
I would frankly let them call the priority. And I say that because the Public Works has a lot on their plate.
Right.
And if.
And I think
it
most-
probably makes sense actually for them to do a cluster of them all at one time. So maybe we don't need to tell them that. Just a thought.
What do you two think?
My big thing is, the city's gonna fix Sylvester. And then they're gonna stop, and they're not gonna say anything more to anybody. That's what's going on for 20 years. That's real dissatisfying.
They kind of grease the squeaky wheel and
Yeah.
walk away.
So we can't demand any more of them, but that is my fear. That they've got the petitions or elsewhere, and that's they're gonna still carry the weight, regardless of what we say here.
But that doesn't mean you don't say it. I mean,
True.
that's all there is.
So, and I think maybe adding, with, potentially addressing the high school area first, or something like that, to give our guidance in there is not a bad thing, because that really is how this started. And I think that's probably a good, I don't think we want to be too prescriptive.
Sure.
I think we want to, we want to leave it a little bit, as opposed to them just, getting rid of that clause. I think we want them to know, we think that those more restrictive policies should go away.
Right.
And I think we would be, if that passes, through city council, we'll be voicing that.
So I agree, but here's what's rattling around in my head. We keep saying that this is a recommendation, but we're taking ourselves, by the way this is worded, we're taking ourselves out of the process. No one comes to us, so we don't know that it's being ignored.
Yeah, that's true.
If it comes to us in the form of a request, we have then the opportunity to monitor what's gonna happen.
So
So is that
if
a,
citizen high schoolers make requests saying, I'd like to park on such and such street.
why not?
Exactly.
I don't know, Park. I'm on the fence about, I would like to just say, do it and don't tell us about it. But I don't think that's realistic.
Well, I appreciate the time and effort you all put in over years with lots of discussion. So I'm kind of okay with it either way. I appreciate your listening to my idea and you all just, I'll listen to what you think is best. We only get what we get out of it anyway.
Eric, do you have a thought?
This one?
Okay,
Okay, we could say a citizen may request that the ordinance be removed explicitly. Because then all it takes is 10 high school kids to say, look, can I park on the street?
But I don't think, yeah, it's not just, we can't make up how ordinances get. I mean, that's way above our pay grade. There's a total process of how to get rid of an ordinance. I think what we're trying to say is our recommendation is that you start removing those ordinances and putting in a more fair thing. Process. I don't know how to change an ordinance. The city attorney and the city manager and the city council and the mayor, that's what they do.
Yeah, and they can do it. I mean, I think
Right.
we had some more when we first started about it can't be done, but it can be done.
Right. I think if we're recommending, that's,
And if it
all
comes,
we're doing is really recommending.
Okay, but
and if
we,
it comes to the city council, they carry way more weight than we ever will. And so maybe that is the way to do it.
well, okay, we do also work for the citizens who come to our meetings and complain, right?
Yeah, the citizens that have come to complain are ones that have these ordinances protected, that we're gonna meet trying to take it away from.
It is right now. But all I have to do is say, hey, neighbors, you're unhappy about how this is going. I'm on the traffic advisory committee. Go talk to them. Right? I mean, it can be anyone who shows up.
Right. All I'm saying is, I think if we get too prescriptive on things that are above our pay grade, we're not gonna make any traction.
We're already asking for it to be removed. I mean, how, it's already moved into that realm.
Okay, I'm good with it. All right, so is that what we're gonna vote on?
Yeah.
So it's this language or what's the alternative?
No, it's
No,
this
it's this.
language, or not.
This language or no language?
Oh, actually, okay. Well, why don't we say the language you have, which is we don't want these ordinances, or we don't want these ordinances and people may request they are removed. I'm just saying there's a choice because there's no choice of we don't want the ordinances removed.
Yeah, the
We
choice
want
is
them
then they
removed.
stay in place.
Yeah, the
I-
choices,
yeah,
they
okay,
stay in
well,
place. Yeah, I
right.
think that's right.
I mean, those are the two
Okay,
choices.
yes, right. It's the
Okay.
same.
All right. So here's the language. The city will apply our guidelines to existing ordinances that are more restrictive than shared parking for the sake of uniformity, safety, and fairness. If you vote yay, you're in agreement with that statement. If you vote no, the old ordinances remain in effect until changed.
There was something in the way you said that, if you'd read the first half again, because I think these restrictions apply to the streets with present ordinances that are more restrictive. I think you have to add, I think there was a phrase missing in what you just said.
Okay, I
We
missed it.
just said
All right, so I said the city will apply guidelines. Will apply our guidelines to existing ordinances
No, it's not to the existing ordinance, to the streets with existing ordinances.
with streets
Yes.
with existing. Okay, I got it. Streets with.
We might need to wake Ann up. It's probably past her bedtime for this last vote.
Here,
Thanks,
Okay,
Dave.
the city will apply our guidelines to streets with existing ordinances that are more restrictive than shared parking for the sake of uniformity, safety, and fairness. Okay, Ann, yay or nay?
I think I'm yay, right? Because I want the sake of uniformity and fairness, right?
Yay.
Yes, you want yay.
Yay, yay.
Okay,
Yeah.
Steve, yay. Clark?
Yay.
Robert? And me, I'm a yay. So we're all in favor of that one. Okay. Is there any other business that we need to talk about tonight?
Can't imagine.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
No, wait, hold on. I have to say, I hope Officer Weimer, I hope I'm saying his name right. I hope he's getting like time and a half for this meeting. But also I just want to thank him for the radar signs. They were temporary. I think they're already down, but we were so excited to have them up, and anything on South Elm, we are so thankful for enforcement at Swan and South Elm, etc. I just want to say thank you and please keep it up.
I will. My intention is to have those put up periodically. So, yeah, they run on battery. And I know it's not a permanent solution, but it's somewhat of a solution.
There is the one on
And yes, I'll keep up. with that.
McKnight. I mean, there's one on McKnight that's always there. And it's got a solar thing on it. So we don't, the ones we had were better, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Well, and we can talk about that
Paul-
next week on Monday.
Yeah, that can be another time, but just thank you so much, Paul and Eric, for that.
Yeah. I noticed people were.
You're welcome.
So Paul, you hung in with us all evening, and we ought to give you a chance to say something.
I mean, I think we made some progress, so I mean, I'm all for that. I know, if anything comes up, by all means, you have any questions for us, just let us know. That list again, our priority was very helpful for us. We thank you for that. Other than that, I'm good unless you have any questions for me about what we're doing or anything going on with us. I'm all ears.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You got a really good microphone on your computer.
Hey, city provided, man.
I do have one before adjournment. Are
Yes.
you gonna wordsmith these into this
That was my goal.
for us on Monday to
But
maybe
you-
look at?
But let me just say, I am not the best wordsmith in the world, so if you know of a really good wordsmith,
Well, she's on vacation.
I know she is.
But not forever.
No, I just didn't know if we were gonna have, if you
Well-
were planning to do it.
If you all feel that I would take the intent appropriately, I would do it.
Yeah.
Well, how about we split it, you and I, and we'll get back together again.
Actually, how about I do it, give it to you, you give feedback, we fix it.
That's better.
Well, that's okay with me. Now, I think you're aware that these videotape meetings, you have access to a word-by-word transcript of the entire thing.
Well, we have our
So-
vote outcomes and I'm just gonna count on that.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And you have Carrie sent that one out.
I couldn't find it.
She sent it,
You're talking about the original?
yeah.
I can give you a copy. Cause I can
Well, I
always,
want it digital.
I can always get another copy. What'd I do with it?
I think she sent out a PDF, so you'd probably like a Word document that Carrie would have that.
Anyway, I have it. I'll get it to you.
And am I wrong to think that we're talking about changing about 15 sentences at most? Or am I gonna be looking for all
Oh,
these
it's
places?
pretty significant.
I know that it's long,
No,
but I
that-
mean,
There
No.
it is.
I think you're
Take
correct.
that one.
yeah, okay, good. Otherwise I may be.
Like the overall intent, none of that stuff is really, it's just making sure those things.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor?
I.
Aye.
Thanks. Thanks, Ann. Yes.
Thanks, y'all.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody.